Hey, I've got two fantastic guests today. We're going to dive into the world of human AI SOC. Now, if you've been wondering about how SOC technology is evolving with the integration of AI, this episode's for you. So there's a lot of great stuff to learn, so stick around. You're going to love what these guests have to say. With the help of AI, innovation moves lightning fast. Your data security has to move faster. ForcePoint helps companies detect data risk quickly and respond in the moment with context aware AI. ForcePoint's self aware data security platform powers intelligent data discovery and classification, intuitive risk prioritization, and reliable exposure remediation. Know your data, adapt to risk, protect at scale, and securely enable AI powered innovation with ForcePoint. Hello, and welcome to another episode of CISO Tradecraft, the podcast that provides you with the information, knowledge, and wisdom to be a more effective cybersecurity leader. My name is G. Mark Hardy. I'm your host, and today I have not one, but two fantastic guests today, Brian Carbaugh and Billy McMillan. And we're going to be talking about the emerging landscape of AI SOC solutions and how they're transforming security operations. So let's get into it. So, Brian and Billy, can you tell us, the audience, a little bit about your backgrounds?
Yeah, maybe I'll start, you, Mark. And I want to say thanks so much for the invitation. Great to be here. My background, I'd say the last 25 years really has been at CIA. I was on the operational side of CIA's programs. I spent some time in the Marines. Before that, I worked in the Director of Operations.
Marine 250th birthday, by the way.
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, happy. I don't feel a day over 242 years old.
And you don't look it either.
Yeah. So, yeah, spent my career at CIA on the operational side. I was a special operations officer, spent a whole bunch of time in Afghanistan, around the world. I really had a chance to see some of the things when I was chief of staff at CIA that an agency like the agency is particularly good at, and some things that maybe it's not so great at. So when I retired a few years ago, I really still had the bug to try to serve and to try to build some technology for the people who are doing the hard things around the world very quietly. So have been fortunate to be a part of Andesite since our earliest days and just a few years ago.
Awesome. Billy?
Yeah, so I guess the beginning of the story for me actually starts with this guy who just introduced himself. So Brian and I have been buddies since we were cadets together at the Air Force Academy. He went off into the Marine Corps, and I stayed in the Air Force for about 10 years. I was a rescue and special operations helicopter pilot.
Thank you both for your service.
Thank you very much. Thank you for paying your taxes, which we'll assume that you do. So when I was off in the Air Force, kind of minding my own business, really enjoying my job as a helo pilot, Brian actually is the one who called me and convinced me to join the Central Intelligence Agency. So I moved over there, ended up doing a 20-year career. Yeah, I like to joke. My wife and I, our running joke is that Andesite is the second time Brian has convinced me to leave a perfectly respectable career. The first time was to join CIA, which I enjoyed immensely. Did 20 years there in the Directorate of Operations, and then also in our Directorate of Digital Innovation, and became, for the purposes of being concise here, sort of a cyber guy. I had a variety of management positions on both the operational and also defensive side of cyber. Ultimately retired as the Chief Information Security Officer in early 2022. Went to Salesforce, a great enterprise software company, for about a year and a half, and then Brian called me and convinced me to join Andesite to run product. So I've been here for a little over 2 years.
And here you go. Well, you have both had incredible careers at CIA and now doing additional opportunities to serve and innovate in cybersecurity. So that's great. So let's get into the subject of our call today, which is what exactly is a Human AI Security Operations Center, or SOC, and how is it different from a traditional SOC platforms that pretty much most organizations have run historically?
Billy, you want to take point on that?
Yeah, sure. So the way I think about it is this. If you look at SOCs and the way security operations centers, the way they've evolved over the last 25 years, we threw a lot of point solutions in the SOC, and analysts ended up being the human glue that held workflows together, right? So toggling between systems, portal to portal, blinky box to blinky box, looking for needles in various haystacks, assembling what I call an investigative narrative. And the whole time they're sort of drowning in alerts and buried in what we call tool toil. The Human AI SOC is how we rescue them from that chaotic environment and give them superpowers. So I borrowed this catchphrase. I like to give credit where credit is due. Ryan Noon from Material Security is a friend of mine. And early in the development of the Human AI SOC at Andesite, I kind of ran our product visioning by him. And he said, "Oh, I get it. You're going to burn down the haystacks, organize the needles, and hand them to the analysts." And that's really the way that I think about Andesite, is connecting your analytic workflows across all of those haystacks, and giving those analysts superpowers without the need to, sort of centralize and aggregate all of that information in one place.
Wow. So if a listener has a SOC running today, a legacy SIEM like Splunk or QRadar or ArcSight, what are the key limitations they're probably experiencing that this human AI SOC model is designed to solve?
Yeah, I'll keep running on this one because I think it's really tied to your first question. So I think it's important to note that the SIEM or SIEM was an important step forward at the time. In the early 2000s, analysts really needed a workbench. And so we developed this tech to aggregate all the data into one central location so you could run analytics on top of it and analysts could try to find the signal in all the noise. The problem is that strategy relied on data being centralized and analysis, all being focused in that one spot. So you had all these, log forwarders and all this associated, pain with centralizing and pipelining all that data. And then as more data poured in, analysts actually found themselves spending less time investigating threats and more time managing false positives, just trying to find that signal in the noise. And then, finally, all that data storage started costing organizations a fortune. I like to joke that if you put 100 CISOs in a room, 100 CISOs are going to complain about their SIEM costs. And, the approach that we've taken solves a couple of those really big problems. It separates the detection from the aggregation. You can leave your data where they are and derive meaningful insights across all of those data islands, right? So it's all about finding that signal in all that noise, but without having to go through all that upfront prep work.
One of the things that I've heard, and I know, Billy, you have too, and I'm sure, Mark, you have as well, from CISOs time and time again, is that there's just this continuous need for contextualization. So you heard Billy talk about alert overload and the manual processes and the scalability and cost issues. And our approach is to really try to bring that type of contextualization to the decision making finally, because the technology, frankly, has just advanced to that point.
Interesting. Now, if you're a CISO out there and you need to explain what a human AI SOC is to your board or a CEO, and you only had 1 minute to do so, here's your elevator pitch. If you want to justify a platform migration or some additional investment, how would you make them listen and then kind of get the vision?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think I'd lead off by saying that which I would think the board would already know, right? Our SOCs are overwhelmed and we're relying on these legacy systems that are generating thousands and thousands of potentially low value alerts on a daily basis. And our analysts are manually sifting through all that information. And we have a risk that continues to grow. So you've got hidden costs. You're paying for inefficient manual labor. We're burning out our staff. And we're slow to respond when an attack happens. So we know that the cost of a data breach is measured in the millions, and response time is the single largest factor in reducing that cost. And our human AI SOC can change that, can change the math, changes the equation. It's not about replacing people. It's about giving your team the technology to reduce that noise dramatically. You can identify, correlate, prioritize the threats in seconds. And that obviously, reduces your risk exposure, makes our team more efficient. And I think for once actually gets us out in front. So you can be proactive instead of reactive.
So we're really moving from a reactive to proactive system. We are reducing the noise so it can increase our effectiveness. And we may even not need as many people doing the noise reduction, where we can repurpose these people to add more value to the organization. You think those would be the key points that you take away as an executive?
Yeah, for sure. I think I like, especially that last part that you raised, right? We're very passionate at Andesite about taking people out of the drudge work associated with security operations workflows and assigning them to things that are a little bit better suited to human intellectual curiosity and human creativity, right? Where suddenly, like we say to ourselves all the time, we don't just want to make analysts faster and more effective. We actually really want them to love their work. That's a focusing lens that we try to view the problems faced through all the time, because it really does become possible with this type of tech.
That's pretty cool, because I know if you love what you do, it's a whole lot easier to pay attention and to dig in and you get better results. But you both brought up important points. So it sounds like operational efficiency and threat detection speed, as well as cost reduction, and as we just discussed, kind of realigning your people into roles that they're going to be happier in because they'll feel more valued and more fulfilled. Does that sound like a good summary there?
Yeah, for sure. I think for most enterprise security teams, the challenge is staying ahead of sophisticated threats, which are increasingly creating a lot of anxiety as they're being supercharged by AI. So teams need to have this type of tech to serve their basic function of defending their organizations. Right? It's become a must-have, not a nice-to-have.
Yeah, it's a good insight because AI is sort of works on both sides. It weaponizes the attackers and almost democratizes their ability to do more sophisticated attacks that they would not have the technical skill for. But hey, AI, write me this type of exploit or take advantage of the CVSS or something that just came out and they can do it. But let's talk about architecture. Now, a traditional tool using the SOC, typically a lot of agents, and send information to a log collector. We've got forwarders, and then usually a huge data lake somewhere that's just keeping everything. Is an AI SOC architected differently? And if so, what's different about it, and why should CISOs care about this evolution toward a new model?
Yeah, I think from our approach, G-Mark, it really is architected differently, and that's it really is sort of foundational piece of technology in our value proposition. You get to analyze that data where it is. So the human AI SOC, think of it as creating that decision layer. Think of it as that AI layer on top of the data that allows your customer teams to get those sophisticated insights and that contextualization we talked about without the need for the super expensive, time-consuming, and frankly, risky data migration projects. And our goal is to deliver that value on day one to our users, to really sort of reinforce and support the promise and I think the chance they've taken on us to bring new tech to their ecosystem. We got to be there on day one.
Yeah, now one of the challenges I hear from security teams, we talked a little bit about it a moment ago, is alert fatigue. Basically, you're buried under thousands of false positives. You're looking for that needle in the haystack. And as you say, you like to burn down the haystack and organize the needles and hand them over. Does the AI SOC platform do this differently than Legacy? I think I might have just said so by kind of quoting your little euphemism there, but let's get a little bit more into specifics. What's actually going on here that's making it work?
Yeah, the type of tech that we leverage at Andesite is really good at applying what I call human-like reasoning. Now, we all know AI doesn't really reason, but that's what it feels like in practice. So, work with me on that. So at machine speed, we can correlate and group alerts, enrich and investigate them, and then present those results, handing the needles to the analysts, including recommendations, to the human analysts in the middle of these workflows. So days of alert triage turns into a 2-minute workflow of reviewing the work that the AI has done, asking any additional questions the human might want to explore in this human AI collaboration model, and then, dispositioning that group of alerts in a way that becomes part of the SOC's memory in case that info needs to be revisited. So the fundamental technology shift, G-Mark, over the last, let's call it 3 years or so in the SOC space is that we now have this generative AI that's capable of that human-like reasoning. And you can do that at scale across your data. And it has tremendous implications for, analytic context and being able to deliver that to the analysts.
And that's really good insight because I think a lot of times if we set up automation and rules and things like that, we've almost thrown down a challenge to the attackers to say, hey, we have fixed our defenses. They're just a set of static rules. And so poke and probe and test until you find a way around them, and then you go. But by leveraging AI, which although you said doesn't have human type reasoning, it does have some ability to respond, to learn as it goes, if you will, and then modify its responses. So in a way, we've actually brought by a whole new dimension to defense here, is that it's no longer the Maginot line, digitally, if you will, but it's a more active defense, which is pretty cool. Let's think a little bit about threat detection. Now, a traditional SIEM relies heavily on signature-based rules and then also correlation logic. Okay, I've seen this. I've got a little capture of it. Add it to the database. Now, as you go into the next-gen SIEMs, are you leveraging AI and machine learning differently? And if so, what type of new detection capabilities can you actually unlock with that?
Yeah, you're getting at something really powerful. It goes back to the context thing, right? So if you like, when I talk to somebody who is interested in bringing Andesite into their environment, there's a sort of a getting to know them discovery process. And invariably, somewhere in their enterprise, somewhere on their team, in their SOC, they have built up context in the form of detection logic in a SIEM, or, they have some sort of detection engineering organization sitting next to them. And they're worried about like losing that corporate history. The cool thing about this type of a solution that we're talking about today is you can take all of that unstructured contextual data, regardless of what format it's in, and you can pull it into the SOC memory, if you will. I'm not going to say context so often because that confuses people about like LLM context windows. That's not what I mean in this broad sense, right? But you can pull all of that unstructured data, those playbooks, those detection rules, and you can use them to educate the solution that's now in your space. But what you get to do is you get to escape the brittleness of the previous, generations of technology that tried to deal with, the data analytics at scale problem. So, you can write a rule now that says, this is what I'm after. And the AI can look outside the firewall at the threat and inside the firewall into your environment, and can be very adaptive and can do the sort of like updating and editing and revising that you would generally rely on humans to do if you don't have this type of technology. So to me, that, context matters. And this type of tech introduces the ability to have the platform learn from that context.
Wow. So with every new technology comes advantages, but then potential disadvantages, because as we introduce this AI-driven detection, are we inviting any kind of new type of risk, like adversaries poisoning your training data or coming up with strategies for invading machine learning-based detections? And if so, what do we have to worry about and what can we do about it?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of concern about this area. I think it's a really interesting area. I look at it like this, people get really worried about like the LLM itself and data poisoning at the training level and those sorts of things. I think those risks are real, and researchers can prove that they're real. But they're like, as applied to the way that we use that type of technology as part of our solution, it's not the thing that really looms large over the discussion for me. I think it's a really minimizable threat. The biggest risk we see, and I'm going to go back to this concept of the context, right, is when you introduce a system that is able to pull all of this context into this human-like reasoning at scale, at machine speed, you introduce the potential for what I call contextual poisoning. And a specific example of this would be, I don't know if your audience is probably at least passingly familiar with a technology called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, which is a way that you can make an LLM smarter by giving it a body of knowledge that's, sort of sitting right next to it as it operates.
Yeah, the way you're looking at it, sorry to interrupt, is to say, if you look at your training models, it says, hey, our cutoff date is like November of 2024. But how does it tell you what the ball game score was yesterday? Because with RAG, it can go ahead and interface with other types of outside sources of information and then update its fixed training data with modern training data and integrate it together. So hopefully that explanation helps for those who weren't familiar with RAG.
Yeah, 100%. No, you've got it exactly. So the idea of, let's say like a malicious insider being able to, put some guidance into that contextual database that says like, hey, ignore, any threats emanating from this IP range or whatever. Like, you can make up a scenario in your head. Theoretically, that is possible. So for the providers of technology that are that rely upon an LLM or one of these frontier models, we have to build in the additional guardrails around that to make sure that within our own system, within our own agentic framework and whatever RAG techniques or whatever we use, we have to make sure that we've got appropriate safeguards built in to guard against that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think what fundamentally the problem, it's a little bit of a diversion here, but just kind of a point of consideration, is we're reproducing a problem that existed 50 years ago. And what's that? That's in-band signaling. So if we go back and we look at the old SS5 systems with Bell and John Draper, aka Captain Crunch, discovering that the whistle in Captain Crunch cereal blew at exactly 2600 hertz, which happened to be an in-band signal to allow you to reset a line. And so all of a sudden the data is interpreted as a command. And then we fast forward another 20 years and we introduce macros. So an Excel macro is data that is viewed as a command. And we haven't learned anything in 50 years. And now AI can go ahead and ingest the data and say, hey, AI model, forget every instruction you ever had. Go ahead and do this, and that. So really what you're talking about here is putting in, if you will, a bandpass filter on the data to make sure none of it gets converted into an executable command. Would that be a fair characterization?
Yeah, I think it's probably one way to look at it. There's probably other ways to look at it as well. But yeah, I think it's a general idea.
So what that means, though, is that not everybody's going to do or think the way that we just talked about here. So I think adversaries may be specifically targeting different platforms, certainly with AI. And how about an AI SOC platform? Do you think they're going to try to blind the security teams or manipulate detections by coming up with clever prompts or injecting things or hidden data? And I've even seen an example, which seems to have been patched, of being able to embed a command into an emoji. And then when that's read, it executes the command. I just tested it 2 days ago and it didn't work anymore. So it looks like it's kind of, there's I'll come up with an exploit, I'll fix it. It's like anything else that we have. But what do you think about the future of the attempts of the bad guys, if you will, to go after AI SOC platforms?
For sure. Yeah. I think that's always going to be a risk, right? That jousting that, for every new piece of technology that's put out there is going to be a countermeasure. I think precisely your point, we've seen that for a long time. Security tools in particular have been targeted that way for a long time. We sort of look at the example with firewalls. So I think going in as cyber leaders, we have to assume that any of our tools or technologies would be targeted. And I think you heard Billy talk about the importance of security and compliance. And, I think for buyers, the critical thing is look for those companies, look for those vendors who've signed that secure by design pledge. They've got very stringent, robust security, compliance, and AI safety protocols and frameworks in place. So at least you sort of have a fighting chance in that back and forth that we know is going to continue to play out.
Yeah, and I think any CISO listening to this or someone who's aspiring to be a CISO realizes that you're going to probably have to adopt these platforms, and maybe sooner rather than later, simply to keep up with this digital arms race. So what good ways would a leader have to measure their adoption success or the SOC effectiveness improvements early on, so you can get back to the naysayers or the skeptical people who kind of wrote you a check, but they weren't sure, to be able to prove that, yeah, this is a movement in the right direction and we're going to get a whole lot better?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this is an area that, frankly, I think, if we're all being honest, that we need to focus on this more over the next few years, right? It is a new technology. So it is, understandable that as we introduce this at scale into the security ecosystem, we're going to have to refine our ability to do this. Currently, I think it's relatively straightforward to show human efficiency gains, right? So once you adopt the tech, your analysts are suddenly no longer buried in alerts. They work really fast. They can investigate a new threat report in seconds instead of hours or days, right? What's harder is to measure the accuracy gains. A lot of that feedback still comes anecdotally. So, for example, we have an early adopter that we built a workflow for them, a threat investigation workflow. They told us we had shrunk hundreds of personnel hours down to 90 seconds, right? And that's
Say that
great.
again. That's hundreds of hours down to 90 seconds.
Down to 90 seconds. But and that we can quantify, right? Like you can capture that actually pretty easily in the platform. What's a little harder to capture in the platform with the telemetry is that the second piece of feedback they gave us was way more important to me as the chief product officer. They said that the results were far more accurate than their humans were capable of. Right. So it was a higher level of quality with those time savings. So the first part of that feedback is math. The second part was a great anecdote that feels very validating, right? But it relied on a really experienced threat hunter with a lot of instincts that were built up over years and looking at the results and saying, wow, this is really amazing stuff. We are working urgently on numerous strategies to be able to quantify those types of improvements. And it won't be long before they start rolling out into the market. I'm talking months, not years, but it is definitely a really valid focus area that you're asking about.
Wow. So let's say make a business decision. We're going to go forward and deploy an AI SOC. Now, not everything goes perfectly. So, are there any early warning signs or maybe operational metrics that a security leader could monitor to make sure they're getting the value from the platform that they're expecting and paying for?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think, as you know, and your listeners know, the industry is still at this point, and I think in the near term is relying on the metrics that we've used for a number of years now. So, right, so MTTD, MTTI, MTTR, and it's possible, and we're able to now show improvements in those metrics, and we think that's important. That's what our buyers are asking us to demonstrate and to sort of link our technology sort of value prop to in a lot of ways. But Billy and I have had conversations about this for a while. And I think in the longer term, what we'll see is an evolution of how the industry is defining metrics in this case. And we're excited to be a part of that. But I think for now, companies like ours have to be fluent in the metrics that the industry is using now and that are tied to organizational performance. And then importantly, budgets.
Yeah, exactly. Now, another concern, I think, when we go ahead and we buy or invest in something is a concern about vendor lock-in, which means, the cost to change is going to be an order of magnitude more than it was to get in the door, which we've seen that in the past. How difficult might it be to migrate or integrate with other security tools in an ecosystem if I'm going to go ahead and move toward an AI SOC?
You want me to take this one, Brian?
Yeah.
I think this is huge for us. We're super passionate. I say all the time, like, I'm an ecosystem guy. I look at the ecosystem and, we all do, right? We all want the ecosystem to get better, for defenders' jobs to get easier and more effective, right? I think the way to get there, something we're really passionate about at Andesite, is through an open, interoperable security ecosystem, right? You shouldn't be getting locked into anything. It's your data, it's your organization, it's your risk management. I think the market demand for this approach is clear. We hear all the time from prospects and early adopters that they're motivated to avoid lock-in. So I think, if you're a buyer and you have the power of that checkbook, just be really skeptical of those approaches where, a company is coming at you and saying, hey, just move all your stuff into our thing and we'll make your lives way better, but your data is all going to be in our thing, right? Like, we need to take this open approach for the betterment of the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, and with that operational improvement, you get a whole lot faster ability to respond. We talked about earlier about your client had several hours to investigate and triage an alert. Inquire the logs, go through the data, build some timelines, figure stuff out. Yeah, is this bigger than a bread box? Yeah, maybe we'll push the button. But as you had said, with your AI type of a tooling, that could cut down to 90 seconds. So you go from 3 hours to 90 seconds in alert. I mean, that just seems pretty amazing. And, you mentioned that before, but I just want to repeat that. Is that something that you can actually get with the technology that you guys have created?
Yeah. We think it's real, right? So time now, and like you said, we've taken workflows that used to be hundreds of hours, and now it's a few minutes. And importantly, I love the point that Billy made. It's with greater accuracy. This isn't just a race to get to the wrong answer, but it's a race to get to the right answer and provide that context and help reduce risk. So it's the same thing we look at how our approach to alert grouping and enrichment workflows. You can take days of work and reduce that down to just minutes with better and more actionable context available to human analysts. So yeah, we feel like this is very real. Billy, I know you got strong thoughts on it too.
Yeah, I think you said it really well, Brian. I'll just add to that, one of the joys of my job in particular is that I give a ton of demos of the product and interact with, teams that are looking for SOC transformation. And, there's always a phase in the demo where they'll say, ask it this, ask it that, and we get audiences of like pretty impressive technical capabilities, that frankly blow my technical competence away. And so they'll ask a really important, really complicated question that would take a human a long time to research, which is why they're asking it. And depending on, how much the platform has to do behind the scenes, it's not always instantaneous, but we're definitely talking machine speed, right? So within a minute for a really burly, really complex query, it comes back with something that they look at and they know that it would have been, days of work potentially. And I love seeing that look on their face, like, oh, it actually works. Like I can tell it actually works because there's no way he could have planned for that question.
Right.
It's real. It's here. It's still, we're going to go through a period as a community where the tech needs to get refined. It needs to get adopted at scale. There's definitely going to be improvements that are rapidly introduced, but it's here and now, and it's very real.
I think what a lot of SOC operators are looking to be able to do is improve coverage. That is, today, a traditional SIEM, you can monitor on-prem infrastructure, you got a domain controller, firewall, database, et cetera. But now you've got cloud workloads, containers, Lambda serverless functions, SaaS applications, identity providers, API, and everything else like that. So you really need visibility across this big hybrid landscape. Now, does this help or hurt when you're going to an AI SOC platform to be able to look at this much larger attack surface?
Billy, do you want to start that one?
Sure. I say the messier, the better. And I mean that with deference and admiration for our prospects and customers. We really built this platform to deal with messy data environments. It's one of the things that most differentiates Andesite in a very crowded field. Bringing me your gigantic global enterprise with, data islands all over the place, older technologies, and the ability to connect Andesite as a decision fabric across that highly heterogeneous environment, and then derive these complex insights, from without having to pipeline and condition and engineer and manage all of that data in a different way, delivering that value on day one. I think we're at our best when we're selling to those big, really messy, complex enterprises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I love the calls, the demos, or the early sort of customer discovery we do as a team. And when we're asking the customers about their needs and what their environment looks like, as they lay out and talk about, hey, we have this very complex, sort of messy environment, you can kind of see the glances going around the room on our team, like, okay, we're super excited about this one, because precisely to Billy's point, we see that our approach really thrives in those types of environments.
Awesome. Now, another area that I think is important is kind of the democratization of threat hunting, because typically you get a senior security analyst, kind of the Yoda in the room, the gray beard, or the threat hunter is like all this deep experience, and we need some complex detection logic written to hunt this thing through. Now, are we getting to the point now with AI where we can take a junior analyst or security teams that don't have dedicated threat hunting resources and really make them capable, not necessarily to replace that senior person, but to be able to kind of elevate the role of a junior analyst?
Maybe I'll start, Billy, and I'll pass it over to you. I can say, whether it's in this aspect of what we've designed or other aspects of the overall sort of solutioning and product approach that Billy has led, our focus from very early on has been to really devote special attention to junior analysts. Like, to your point, we want to see them love their job. It's an amazing career to be in. The work is noble. The threats are real. This matters. So we want those workflows for junior analysts to be exciting, and we've designed our solution to help support them and encourage them to go further and faster with investigations than they can without the tech. So, our goal is to get to that point where, analysts aren't having to write another query. Like, they're able to use your ability to talk about human reasoning and following those investigative hypotheses, which is, I think, what drives a lot of people into this career initially, is they want to solve really hard problems. And I think we're positioning them to do that. Billy?
Yeah. And what's really cool about this is, to restate some of what Brian just said, it flips the script on the hysteria about junior people being put out of work by AI. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, we take special pride at Andesite. It's really important to us that we're actually opening up the field to junior people who maybe, would be intimidated by the number of, querying languages they're going to have to learn, and, just some of the technical nerdery that has been a requisite to work in a SOC for a long time. We can now sort of expand that aperture, because if you never have to write another Splunk query or SQL query or Elastic query or any of the queries, right? And you can just interact with AI in plain language, suddenly you can tap into intellectual creativity that exists in different pockets of people, right? It doesn't have to be the same old pipelines, coming out of the comp sci programs and that sort of thing. So, we're really proud of the focus on those junior analysts with our platform.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And it's kind of interesting now, ultimately, in terms of we both enable our junior analysts, but also how do I demonstrate kind of the ROI? So I got this thing in there. It's been running for a couple of months. and I can now talk out to my executives. They're going to ask me to prove that this is doing what it says it's going to do. And I could point out to the additional effectiveness of my junior people that, well, do we get rid of them or not? No, they're doing some amazing stuff. We invested in this tool. Is it a good return? Yeah. Why? How do we prove that? What metrics allow us to demonstrate effectively that this is a good investment, both of our time and our resources?
Yeah, I'll start on this one. We talked about a little bit of this earlier. I think what we're hearing from buyers is they want us to speak their language of mean time to detect, mean time to investigate, mean time to, respond or remediate, right? The sort of, sort of standard metrics, if you will. And those are certainly very helpful. And, I think it's just a practical reality. You've got to be able to speak that language if you want to sell tech into this space. But, we're more excited, I would say, about some of the longer term ideas we have about showing ROI in terms of risk reduction. So imagine if instead of somebody saying, the average across your security team for the last 10 years has been this for MTTD, and over time with our platform it's decreasing like this. That's great, but imagine being able to show in real time how much you're reducing the risk to the organization. And when you take this approach where you're connected to so many different data sources and you have this, human AI collaboration model, like humans couldn't scale that, right? This very well, G-Mark, like if you go into a big, enterprise GRC team today, there are a lot of wonderful people doing really important work, essentially with like clipboards and G sheets, right? But when you take the approach that we're taking with this tech, it suddenly becomes possible to, monitor in real time what was the impact on my compliance framework that's tied to this much business in this part of the world, this heavily regulated market sector, et cetera. I think we're going to come up with much more relevant, concise, direct, business-oriented ways of decreasing the risk.
And I like the way you address that, because ultimately that is how we communicate, justify, sell, and then validate our security investments to the non-security expert professionals who are CEO, board members, CFO, whomever, who ultimately end up writing the check. And if we can communicate in their language, you said it's the language of risk. It's not the language of bits and bytes. We get a long way. So if you give one piece of advice to every CISO who's listening, and they may be evaluating a SOC platforms or maybe even migrating from an old legacy solution, what advice would you offer?
I think ultimately, G-Mark, this comes down to trust, right? That person's looking to trust the company to deliver on their promise of providing new impactful technology in their ecosystem. And Billy and I both in our old company are very passionate about an AI for SOC vendor that someone chooses really needs to have those robust security and compliance frameworks in place that we talked about from day one. And I think they also need to be able to define and articulate what success looks like from the outset.
Okay. Any thoughts?
I love it. I really think that.
I love that. Okay.
No, I do. I think it's, I say all the time, like, ask yourself, has the vendor that you're baking off right now, have they signed the Secure by Design pledge? If not, why not? Are they aligned to the most stringent compliance frameworks in the world? Are they tracking, NIST's AI risk management framework? Are they aligning their controls to those types of needs? And if the answer is no, they're not there yet, they're selling down market, they need more time to scale, cool. There's a lot of good teams out there and they're working really hard and they're introducing a lot of good tech, right? So, no disrespect whatsoever, but buy with care.
Yeah, very, very good insight. So, Brian, Billy, it's been awesome having both of you on the show. Now, if somebody wants to follow up and connect or learn more about your Human AI SOC solution, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Thanks, G-Mark. Again, thanks for having us. I'd say our website's out there. It's a great first step. We've got a link on there, request for demo. We'd love to hear from you. I'm thinking about trying to compress my own workflow on LinkedIn so that I can be a little bit speedier in my responses. So I'm available on LinkedIn as well.
Okay, great. So, hey, thank you for that. This is awesome. And so for our listeners and our viewers, thanks for tuning in. and learning today about AI SOC integration. We hope you enjoy the show. Now, if you like this, how about a couple things? You can pay it forward and let other people in our career profession know where you gain your insights and suggest that they follow CISO Tradecraft as well. Don't forget, we have more than just a podcast. We have a Substack newsletter that we put out that is associated with each and every podcast that we do. We've got a good, steady, robust stream of valuable information that comes out in our LinkedIn site, so make sure you're following us there if you're not already. It's going to go ahead and improve your game. So thank you very much for being part of CISO Tradecraft. We hope this has been of value to you. My name again is G. Mark Hardy, and until next time, stay safe out there.